Peace and welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation. Folks, we got to talk about the aftermath of the video release of the killing of Tyre Nichols. We're going to break this conversation down for you in so many ways. But the first part we got to talk about is 71 commands, 13 minutes, how the police ordered this brother, 71 different commands and orders. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll also talk about why it's important for us to have a very real conversation about watching this level of brutality. And I'm asking the question, should we watch? We'll have that conversation later on. Let's talk about healing in the aftermath of this situation. What does that look like, especially for Black men? And then also later, we're going to be talking about Attorney Ben Crump and the latest developments around his lawsuit against the state of Florida and the governor there. So we got a lot to have a discussion about. Folks, I want you to join in for this very, very special conversation about this situation as it relates to the death of our brother Tyre Nichols. Stay with us. All of it is coming up next here on The Culture on the Black Star Network. Folks, welcome to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation. Folks, this has been a very, very hard weekend for a lot of people in this country, both Black and white, but particularly for Black men. And today we wanted to have a show about the discussion around what we have witnessed and what we are seeing and continue to still experience as it relates to the death of our brother Tyre Nichols. Now, this is the young man that was the 29-year-old man that was beaten to death on January the 7th due to a traffic stop by 5 other black former Memphis police officers. And as a result of that brutality, our brother had transitioned on January the 10th due to those injuries. Now, of course, there were a lot of talk about what would be happening. Those officers were charged with second-degree murder and a host of other charges, each of them. But once that video was released of the brutality of that traffic stop, it turned everything over. Everything changed. And so I wanted to have a conversation. The way we're going to structure this discussion today is that first part of this is that we're going to look at the fact that according to a New York Times analysis of the 13 minutes of that video footage, there were a number of commands that were given to Tyre Nichols in a way that no one could have followed. 71 commands given in 13 minutes, and a lot of them were in contradiction to one another. Commands such put up your hands while the officers held his hand back. Commands such as lay on the ground while the officers had restrained his body from moving. These commands got Tyre Nichols unfortunately killed as a result of him not being able to follow those instructions. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. The next part of this conversation is around the idea of what my brother, Dr. Jason Nichols, put out as linked fate. And we're going to talk about this phenomenon of linked fate, this phenomenon of watching brutality on screen. And what does that do for us, particularly for those of us in the community, in the Black community? So I'm asking the question, should we watch? And then later, we're going to talk about healing. How do we move forward from such a tragedy? Let's first start with my brother, Dr. Jason Nichols, who serves as a lecturer for the African American Studies Department at the University of Maryland. You see him now on Mondays here on The Culture. And I'm so happy to have my brother and his intelligence joining us for this conversation. Dr. Nichols, thank you so much, brother. How are you this afternoon?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you for having me again.
Absolutely. Let's talk about these 71 commands that the New York Times put out. And folks, I want y'all to really understand the moment that we're in, because for me, this whole situation, brother Jason, it just got me to my core, bro. It got me to my core. You know, I'm a black man. I can be stopped at any time. I think about, you know, the conversations I need to have with my son, who's a 9-year-old black boy. I mean, it just shakes you up, you know. And you know, it's one thing, you know, I think that for some reason, like it was sort of kind of like this kind of, and I don't know how to describe the space of being in a place where, you know, you're like, okay, white cops are going to treat you this way. The thing about this one is that it was 5 black cops, 5 black men. Now they just announced that they have a 6th man, a 6th police officer who is a white male, who, according to the documents, have been charged. This is former officer Preston. He was just charged or relieved of duty as a result of his involvement in this situation. And apparently, according to the reports, he was the one that pulled Tyre Nichols out of the car that led to him being beaten, him being brutalized. And he also, in that video, made the statement, they need to stomp his ass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so I mean, this is just a lot, and we're going to be doing some processing here, and I'm inviting all my online culture crew. Y'all join me. This is still very raw, and I'm gonna be super honest. This is still very raw, but as we're doing this show, my hope and prayer, my true hope and prayer is that we can kind of work through this, process this together, and letting this be a safe space for us to do it. So before I even jump in, brother, I got to check in with you. How are you feeling? Because I know this rattles you too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm feeling what everybody else is feeling. You know what I mean? I'm feeling what all of the black mothers and sisters and fathers and brothers and black men are feeling around the country. You know what I mean? We all know that this could be us. And we all know that this is part of the system of white supremacy. White supremacy, as I believe I've said on your show, one of the things that there's an author by the name of George Lipsitz. He's a white man. But he writes that white supremacy is the one equal opportunity employer in our society. And what he means by that is it will use anybody, whether they're black, whether they're brown, whether they're yellow, whether they're red, and certainly if they're white, to propagate white supremacy. So we all remember that scene from Boys in the Hood where the cop was like, "Oh, you think you tough?" and
right, classic scene.
Yeah, another young brother up against the hood, and I can tell you, in my experiences with police, my worst experiences have been with black cops. That's just keeping it real. And I've said this before publicly several times, where they've tried to paint this narrative, racist white cop. That what that does is allow for us to ignore the systemic issues within policing and make it about one racist guy that we could just pluck out of the system and then we're all good. Or we could just recruit a bunch of black officers without making any systemic changes, and then everybody's good. And the interesting thing about this, Farajii, is I was looking up the first black police officers in Memphis. There's actually a documentary about it. And the first black police officers came in 1948 in Memphis, Tennessee. So this is even pre-civil rights. First of all, Memphis schools didn't even desegregate until 1961. So 13 years earlier, they were willing to desegregate their police force and put black cops in there. Because there was lots of violence against black people. Black people were being treated poorly in Memphis. And the black people said, hey, we want somebody from our community to be part of the police force. So they recruited 9 police officers in 1948. They had 160 applicants, and 9 black police officers eventually joined the force. Now, that is a positive thing, and those officers are kind of legendary in the Memphis Police Department. But I also want to offer another way of looking at that. They weren't going to desegregate schools, but they would desegregate their police force because they realized that that really wasn't going to change the way they policed. That wasn't going to change the system. As a matter of fact, if you go to the most egregiously racist system that we know from our lifetime that I can think of, it's apartheid South Africa, right? But what people don't know was that police force was pretty much evenly divided between Black, white, and Indian officers. So you had Black officers running through Soweto, enforcing the laws of apartheid. There were Black officers doing that. Now, that's not to say that there aren't Black officers who are conflicted. And I know cops, you know what I mean? I know a lot of them. I'm sure you know some cops, Farajii.
Absolutely.
Guys, you know, they're guys who really want to help their community. And so in no way am I saying that, you know, you can't trust a Black cop. What I am saying is that there are systemic changes that need to be made. And while I'm really happy with the response of Chief CJ Davis in Memphis, we also have to remember that's after the fact. Beforehand, when you had the Scorpion unit, a lot of those guys have been on the force for 2 years. Some have been on for, I think the most of those guys, the longest tenure was 6 years on the force. They were out there unsupervised, no sergeant. You know, nobody to say, you know, hey, that they were accountable to. So there was disorganization already in that unit. There's no way that you should have a bunch of guys who are not experienced and unsupervised on the job, because the result are dangerous situations like this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Before you go on, Doc, I want to take a moment because we're going to try to get as much information across as much as we can. But and I'm glad that you brought that history. I'm glad that you shared your personal experience, because I think, you know, this is the time for us to do it, right? Because it's like we cannot have these conversations in a silo.
Right.
And I think that for our Black brothers and for our Black sisters, you know, who are also a part of this, Corinna, I see what you said. You said, you brought it in. You said that, you know, the fact that let's not lose Black women in this is about Black human beings and how we are treated, or rather mistreated, at the hands of justice. Absolutely. Absolutely. But, and I don't want us to lose that fact, Sister Corinna, but the thing is making sure that Black men have a place so we can express this, so we can at least talk about this. Because I think for a lot of us, basically, even my runs with the police, you know what I'm saying? I had a gun put on the back of my head when I was a young boy. Before they even saw my face, Doc. I was just literally getting off the bus in Baltimore, and then I saw the police helicopter, and I told myself, the helicopter, this is a busy area in the city. And it was late at night. It was in the evening, not late at night. It was in the evening. The light was on. They were searching the premises. You know, it was like a shopping center. And I certainly told me, man, when you get off this bus, the light is about to shine on you. And sure enough, I got off the bus and the light shined on me. All I heard was, put your hands up and get on the ground. And all I can feel, I had a hoodie on, was somebody had that gun to the back of my head.
Wow. You know, real quick, and I know you got to hit a break, but I'll just tell you my experience in Baltimore. The first time I'd ever had a gun pulled on me was in Baltimore City, and I was outside of an arcade that you're probably familiar with. There's an arcade that used to be called Crazy John's.
Absolutely.
You know, everybody knew Crazy John's.
Everybody, right.
And So we were, I was with a bunch of friends. I was probably 15 or 16. And, I'm not even gonna front that, we were doing things that teenagers probably shouldn't do, drinking alcohol or whatever. And I remember a police car rolled by, and I had, at that time, it was like the Menace to Society era. So I had a 40, and I put the 40 under my chair. And so the cop comes, there's a cop on each side of the window. And he says, "What did you put under your seat?" And, at first I'm like, nothing. We all have our hands up. Told us to put our hands up. What'd you put under the seat? And I was like, nothing. I didn't put anything under the seat. And then finally I said, I put a drink under the seat. He said, "I know you're lying." I said, "Do you want me to show you?" And I dropped my hands like that. Like I was like, "You want me to show you?" And I heard, I looked over and the gun was basically to my temple. And he said, "You want to get shot?" And I wonder, because I was a suburb kid, he took my license, he took all of our licenses. I wonder if my address saved my life that night. I often think about that. Because I wasn't, a working class Black kid. I was a suburb middle class Black kid. I often wonder how much that played a role in it.
That's huge, brother. That's huge.
And I recognize my own privilege in that situation.
That's huge. That's huge. Look, we got to take a quick pause, folks. When we come forward, let's continue to have the conversation. I want to break out for you what New York Times said. 71 commands, 13 minutes. Also, we're going to talk about this idea of should we watch the video? And I'm sure that some of you may have already seen it, but is it in the best benefit for us as a whole, as a people, for us to take in images of this level of brutality? We're going to continue the conversation. Stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Folks, welcome to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. We've been talking about the latest around the case of Tyre Nichols. This is the young Black man who was beaten to death by five former Memphis police officers. The case that has rocked this whole country this past weekend, the case that has shown what brutality looks like, and even the case that has also shown what self-hatred looks like. This case is just shakes you. It gets to the core of who you are, especially if you are a member of the Black community. We've been talking to my brother, Dr. Jason Nichols from the University of Maryland, kind of getting his analysis. And in a few moments, I want to bring in my other brother, Brother Richard Rowe, who is a man that has been talking about Black male achievement, fatherhood. He's an author. He's an advocate, and he is a part of the Black Mental Health Alliance. And we want to have a conversation about, should we watch this level of brutality? But I wanted to get into very quickly, I wanted to let folks know, we talked about 71 commands in 13 minutes, 71 commands. Here's what the New York Times reported based on their analysis of that 13-minute video of the interaction between Tyre Nichols and those 5 police officers. Take a look at this really quickly, folks. The review of the available footage found that officers shouted at least 71 commands during the approximately 13-minute period before they reported over the radio that Mr. Nichols was officially in custody. The orders were issued at 2 locations, one near Mr. Nichols' vehicle and the other in the area he had fled to, and where he would be severely beaten. The orders were often simultaneous and contradictory. Officers commanded Mr. Nichols to show his hands even as they were holding his hands. They told him to get on the ground, even when he was on the ground, and they ordered him to reposition himself even when they had control of his body. Experts say the actions of the Memphis police officers were an egregious example of a long-standing problem in policing in which officers physically punish civilians for perceived disrespect or disobedience, sometimes called contempt of cop. The practice was notoriously prevalent decades ago. I want to get your take on this, Brother Jason. Talking to my brother, Dr. Jason Nichols. What do you make of that? 71 commands. And you know, if you go further in the New York Times piece, it said, that one cop told him to put up his hands. The other one told him to put down his hands. Just contradictory commands. Then another cop came onto the scene and told him something else, and he couldn't do it. They pepper sprayed him. They punched him when he was down on the ground. They kicked him in his face. And then they talked about putting his hands behind his back, laying on his body. The man is in pain. Mm-hmm. How do you reckon? And I know that this is, it's easy for us to go down the space of this is proper policing, but I'm just talking about just the simple fact that a person, anybody, not just Tyre Nichols, anybody would not be able to follow those orders under those stressful circumstances.
Absolutely. It's the old hurry up and wait, stand up and sit down. When you're hearing all of those contradictory comments, and like you said, he's buzzed, he's dazed. People have been kicking him in his face. Like he's not alert. It's not like they're having a coherent conversation. You have somebody dragging you out of a car, pepper spraying you, punching you, kicking you. You are not able to follow. And this is, again, why I say that there needed to be a supervisor. There needed to be somebody who was in charge out there to say, oh, this is what we want you to do. Instead, they had a bunch of foot soldiers who didn't know, who were sitting there shouting things at him, not knowing how to deal with these circumstances. And it was a tragic situation that was doomed to fail from the very beginning. So I think this is, again, a systemic thing, not only within Memphis, although I think there was a problem there in Memphis Police Department. There was a problem with this Scorpion unit. I'm glad they've disbanded it, but I think that you're going to get other lawsuits from people who are incarcerated, who may have been caught by this unit, who are going to say, hey, my rights were violated, that this was a rogue unit. And we're going to probably hear even more allegations and information out of that. But at the same time, this is the kind of thing, the kind of systemic thing that needs to be fixed. You can't have these kinds of circumstances and then put on top of that the unnecessary brutality.
Absolutely. I want to bring in my brother Richard Rowe, who has been doing this work of teaching Black men how to be men. He has done a host of workshops around the country. He has done, just fantastic work, always teaching about the empowerments of Black men, Black women, and Black families. And again, folks, he's working with, he has done work with the Black Mental Health Alliance. Brother Richard Rowe, it's always a pleasure to have you on, brother. Thank you so much for being with us, especially on this day. Brother Richard, I want to get your take before we move into this conversation about watching this brutality. 71 commands, 13 minutes. This Black man surrounded by other Black men, and he experienced this. What do we make of this, Brother Richard?
Brother Farajii, first let me, shout out to you for, again, your work, and probably only you could have me on this talk today, because I mean it's been hard, man. It's been hard because given all of my years of doing this work, to be a Black man and to continue to witness this kind of brutality at the hands of other Black men. Again, we could go back to slavery, because again, one of my favorite movies to watch to remind me of the dehumanization process that we have been under and been through for decades and for centuries is 12 Years a Slave, where the slave, Solomon Northup, was forced to whip another slave, a sister, in the movie, man. Again, that is what we have been taught to do or programmed to do since slavery days. And so to see that manifested or to see that in real time today was very difficult. My wife, by the way, has been asking me all day, how you doing? How you doing? She, in fact, not just today, but over the past few days. And brothers, it's been hard for me to sleep for a long time, because again, this is just the incident of brutality that was captured on video. There's so many since George Floyd and since Freddie Gray in Baltimore and Tamir Rice and Michael Brown and Oscar Grant, and we can go down this long list. It never ends. And so 71 commands to win the world, their brother, beaten the way he was beaten, could really understand, interpret, process, a small percentage, 5%, 2% of those commands. He was simply in life, in survival mode. And, something happens to the brain, something happens to the ability to process commands or directives when you are under that kind of stress. He was stressed out. He was simply trying to figure out, how is he going to get back home safely? How is he going to get back home?
Right. And he said that in the video. That's what I read, that he did say, look, I'm just trying to get back home. And then, of course, the very heartbreaking line is he's screaming out for his mother. Right. And so I think that this speaks volumes. And for someone not to even have it, and we got to take a quick pause, but for someone in all of those men to not have the mindset, the thought that maybe we're doing too much. This man is literally screaming out for his mother. Maybe we should stop.
And as Black men, no empathy, no sympathy.
No empathy.
Totally indifference to the plea, the call of help, survival. Nothing basically triggered them to say, damn, we need to back off. We need to back up.
Not one cop, Brother Richard. Not one officer said we need to back off. They can miss me with them crocodile tears in prison.
Right.
I'm serious. I have no love. I don't give a damn what happened to them officers. I don't care if they Black men or not.
But that's the extent, again, of the programming, brother. See, again, if we don't really understand, again, Sister Dr. Frances Cress Welsing reminded us, if we don't understand white supremacy, what it is and what it's not, then everything will confuse us. I'm not surprised. We shouldn't be surprised, again, at what has occurred. Once again, we seem to not be able to escape the dehumanization, the demonization, the criminalization, and the brutalization of Black men and Black people in the society. We've got to decide, what are we going to do? That's got to be the bulk of any of our conversations. Not what are they going to do, but what are we going to do to really stop having these kind of incidences occur over and over again, because it is affecting our psychological, our spiritual, our emotional health and well-being. And I'm just not sure how we're going to be able to, deal with all the occurrences, these types of occurrences occurring, happening on seem to be a regular basis. So that's a question for me. What are we going to do?
Absolutely. Look, when we got to take a quick pause, when we come forward, more conversation, Brother Richard Rowe, Dr. Jason Nichols, and of course you folks, let's talk a little bit about the other element of this whole thing, which is the video itself. It was released nationwide, all around the world, and there were a number of platforms that actually put it on their websites. And now we got to ask the question, because my brother, Dr. Jason Nichols, put out something over the weekend that got a lot of people talking, this idea of linked fate. So I'm going to get his take on that, get Brother Richard's take, and of course, hear what you got to say. Stay with us. It's The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
An angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear. Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Folks, welcome back to the show. We've been talking about, of course, the aftermath of the beating of Tyre Nichols. This is the 29-year-old black man that was beaten by former black police officers in Memphis, Tennessee. And this is the picture of the brother. There is a movement right now, folks, that instead of resharing the video, there are a number of people, and there are a couple of platforms that are deciding to put out pictures of our brother in peace, in joy, and happiness, to let that be the last image of our brother and not him crying for help. So I want us to keep that in mind. And Brother Richard, I've been talking to you, race scholar, advocate, and as he's working with Alliance, my brother, Dr. Jason Nichols. Let's talk a little bit about this idea of watching brutality. Doc, Dr. Jason, you put out this tweet that I saw over the weekend. Then I was like, damn, my brother going to be on the show on Monday. This is perfect. This works out for us to get some insight on this. But you put out this tweet, and if we can pull up this tweet, because we got to ask the question, should we keep watching? Now, this is as it relates to Tyre Nichols, but it might be another case coming up, tomorrow, today, tomorrow. It could be something else. So we should be asking the question, should we watch? You put out this tweet, Brother Jason, about linked fate. And this tweet, and I'm pulling it up right now, you said research shows that black folks suffer PTSD from watching videos of blacks being killed by police. It's a phenomenon called linked fate, where we see ourselves and loved ones in the place of the victim. Be careful watching the Tyre Nichols murder video. Protect your mind. What were you thinking when you put that tweet out, and what has been the feedback that you've gotten since you put it out, brother?
Well, I think a lot of people have looked at it, looked at the tweet, that is, and realized, I don't want to watch this. I know what's happened. We already saw, for example, the FBI director, who, law enforcement guys usually, even if it's, there of course are differences between local police and federal law enforcement, but they generally tend to side with one another. And when the FBI director said he was appalled, and when the chief of police said it was the most horrifying thing she'd ever seen, I think that there are a lot of us who had to take that as, I don't necessarily need to watch this because this is going to be disturbing. And for me, personally, I'll just say, like, not only do we share the same last name, but, I kind of had my Obama moment where I was like, if I had a brother, I don't, but if I had a brother, he'd probably look a little bit like Tyre. And so I knew I had to be careful watching it. I told my other family members, be careful watching it because it's going to, trigger some feelings within you. You're going to see your loved ones. My wife is going to see me in that. So a lot of people who felt like they might be sensitive to it chose not to watch and are still outraged by what they are reading and what they know about the case without actually having to watch Black Death. I also think by sharing it, we start to get into basically Black Death porn. And there are some people who I think also become desensitized to it, which is, I think, what our other brother Richards was alluding to, is sometimes we get desensitized to Black Death, and then the result is that we don't necessarily feel it the same way next time. We become numb to it, to Black pain, to Black Death. And I think that's a really, really dangerous place for us to be. So I think it's really important for us to see, to not necessarily have to see it, to experience that trauma, to guard our minds, to guard our hearts from all of that, to not share it. The media has played it over and over and over again. You don't have to share it on your Twitter feed to people who follow you, or on your Facebook feed to your 2,000 friends. You don't have to share that. They're going to get the information, and there are other ways to find out what happened and stay informed without actually having to view the video. I think it was one thing when it was Rodney King at a time when there weren't videos, but we've been inundated with so much Black Death that I don't think many of us needed to see it. Now, I will say I did watch the video. And I don't necessarily regret that. I think for me, the harder thing was reading over and over. And Farajii, I said this to you earlier, was, Nichols, a father, is brutally beaten. I'm like, that's kind of hitting kind of close to home.
Right. I can understand that. I can definitely understand that. And Brother Richard, there are some people. Well, there are two schools of thoughts on this whole idea of watching. I think what Brother Jason said is absolutely right. But then the couple of schools of thought. One is, I think a lot of people have taken the approach of what we see with the mother of, like, Emmett Till, the stance that she took. Let them see the brutality, right? Because if they see the brutality, then hopefully that will change the powers that be. That will change their minds. It will kind of pull on one's humanity, right? And that's the stance, I think, what we saw with our dear beloved sister in regards to Emmett Till. But then on the other side of it is, to, like Brother Jason is saying, it's this level of Black Death porn. And some of us in this day and time, in this culture, we don't know how to have constructive conversations about this level of hatred and brutality for us to just post it on our social media without giving some context, right? And the fact that the family themselves, I was reading Sean King's, who is the activist online. He said he spoke to members of the Nichols family, and they say, look, we want the video to be shown. So you have a family saying, look, I want everybody to see the brutality, but then we also have the cultural side of which is we've seen enough brutality. Do we want to take in one more image? How do we kind of reconcile between those two things, Brother Richard?
I don't know how we reconcile, brother, because again, I started watching the video and stopped. I just can't take it in anymore. Me personally, you know, I have seen, because it's not just the videos that we see of police brutality, but the videos that we see over and over again that appears on the news programs. First, I mean, if it leads, it bleeds. If it bleeds, it leads. Those are the first 5 or 6 stories every night on the news. They are popping up on social media platforms. Haven't we seen enough of the brutality against the black body over these? Now, again, some folks may want that, but there's a quote that says, "The black pain is America's entertainment." You know, and again, I think, and think about this, brothers, and Brother Nichols, great to be on the platform with you. Think about this, you all. You know, we have seen this pain or this brutality over and over again. For many black men, we don't even seek treatment, mental health treatment, or we don't seek counseling. We're the last ones to seek counseling. And so we are, if this is our steady diet, think what it's doing to not just our mental health, but our spiritual health. Think what it's doing to our souls. Brother Randall Robinson asked the question over and over again, where does a black man go to rest his soul? He is speaking about this, how this concept in psychology is called the allostatic load, right? The cumulative wear on our bodies and our minds and our hearts and our spirits, the cumulative effect of all of that. We don't even understand how that's affecting us, and there are all kinds of new approaches, new studies in terms of epigenetics and the neuroscience and how our genes are being affected, how this is impacting the chemical reactions in our bodies. We don't have a clear understanding of that, and when young people see that, young people whose minds are not even capable of processing this level of brutality that occurs over and over again, I'm very, very concerned about that. And for many black men, the first time that they receive any kind of mental health treatment or counseling is when they go to jail. Think about that. So we got all these different, elements or issues that we're confronted with. So for me, brothers, I haven't even watched it from beginning to end. I couldn't watch it. I heard when it came on the screen, and I heard this brother call out, at the beginning. I knew what was in store, and I knew that for me personally, given that I'm already suffering from sleepless nights because of what's happening to black men and black people in the society over and over again, for me personally, I could not and would not watch it from beginning to end. So I'm in the camp. We don't need to watch any more of this, you all.
Even if the family, and I know we got to take a quick pause, but even if the family says, "Look, let's put this out there."
For me, I mean, I respect the family's decision, but I mean, I disagree with us continuing to watch it over and over and over again, because I know what it's doing to our mental and physical health. I know what it's doing to our emotional spirit. I just have a sense that it's tearing on us. It's causing us to have post-traumatic, post-traumatic slavery impact effects and all the other kinds of post-traumatic stress, depression, anxiety, and all those kinds of things that will basically overwhelm us and take us out.
And you know what? I couldn't agree with you more, Brother Rich. And here's why. Because I know all of us, especially as men, we're all men in this conversation. I know our sisters are thinking something too. We all think that we're strong enough. Nobody really comes to
right.
Brother Jason and Brother Richard, we all think that we're strong, that we can handle whatever life throws at us, that we can handle certain things. Like, man, no, I can handle this. I can handle this. I've been through this and I've been through that. And what I found that as I get older, I realized I got limits. I got boundaries. I can't handle what I used to. I can't handle certain things anymore, especially as I'm growing in my evolution of my consciousness. I can't handle certain things anymore.
Especially too, Farajii, when we haven't gone through a healing process. Again, we still believe that we can walk around, we can run through, we can run past healing. I mean, I'm talking about healing that goes deep into our, the soul, healing that allows us to really make it, to get through some of the pain, some of the anger, and all the things that we are constantly bombarded with. So I think that while I respect the family and all of that, I'm just simply saying, for me, there's no way in the world that I watch any more of this stuff, man.
There it is. Look, I got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, we're going to continue the conversation about Tyre Nichols, continue the conversation about the impact of the video, and let's talk about community healing. I got another brother. I think this brother is also dynamic. My brother David Miller will be joining us in a few moments, along with Brother Michael and Hotep, as we continue the conversation. Folks, you don't want to miss the next hour, so stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind $100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com. Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol,
we're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Folks, thank you so much for tuning into The Culture here on the Black Star Network. We truly appreciate it. We've been talking about every different elements of this latest case around the beating of Tyre Nichols by those 5 black police officers. I want to just kind of mention something very quickly. And my brother, Dr. Jason Nichols, had to jump off, but we appreciate the doctor for being a part of the conversation. But let me just share this first, and then we'll get into our next set of guests along with Brother Richard Rowe. We got Brother David Miller, as well as Brother Michael and Hotep. that's going to be joining us. But the 5 officers, Tadarius Bean, I want to throw this out there. I'm sure many of you have seen their names or seen their faces at least. These 5 Black police officers, and I want us to be very, very clear of where they stand in the legal space. The 5 officers, Tadarius Bean, Demetrius Haley, Desmond Mills Jr., Emmett Martin III, and Justin Smith were all terminated on January the 18th. They're each facing 7 counts: second-degree murder, aggravated assault, act in concert, 2 counts of aggravated kidnapping, which is 2 counts of aggravated kidnapping, 2 counts of official misconduct, and official oppression. Damn. I've never heard that charge.
No.
Official oppression. Let me bring my brothers back into the frame. We'll continue to be joined by Brother Richard Rowe, who is a race scholar and an advocate for Black mental health. My brother is Brother David Miller. Brother David, who is an author, he's an educator. He's a creator of a curriculum and program called Dare to Be King. I'm happy to have him joining us as well. And, of course, Brother Michael Imhotep, who is the host of the African History Network podcast show. He is a scholar as well and historian. Brother David, Brother Richard, I know y'all happy to see each other once again, brother. These brothers, I just want to let y'all know, like, real talk, like these 2 Black men in particular, Richard and David, have been integral in my growth as a Black man. And one of the things that Brother David and I, years ago, we used to share the same office space doing social justice work years ago in Baltimore. But more importantly, what it takes to be a Black man. And every time I see Brother Richard and Brother David, they both have always affirmed my Blackness and my maleness. And I never, I always wanted to give them just their flowers, because these brothers are doing the work of teaching Black men how to be Black men. And it seems like now more than ever, their voices are needed and necessary, especially when we see a case like this. And I know, Brother David, you grew up in Baltimore, you have seen your share of violence. But have you ever seen it like this? Is this something new? Is this taking the conversation about self-hatred, Black males, to the next level? I mean, what are we looking at here? Because I want us to get into another conversation, which is about healing, because we do need to heal. As you said, Brother Richard, earlier, we need to figure out, how do we heal from this? How do we walk out of this with something with great substance? Brother David, talk to me, brother.
And I just came in on the heels of what my mentor, Richard Rowe, just said, that Farajii and Dr. Nichols and others, I don't think anything is new under the sun. But what I do think is critically important, as Richard indicated, is healing. And when we talk about healing, one of the things that I think is critically important is that we have to identify, we have to grow, and we have to support those life-giving, life-sustaining institutions in the Black community that are at the forefront of healing, that are at the forefront of community development, that are at the forefront of recruiting and training elected officials to serve in our community. Because I think all of these things are related when we talk about community violence, when we talk about what I call the 10 rules of survival when stopped by the police, or police engagement, is that our efforts have to be sustained. And I think all too often what happens is we kind of lull ourselves to sleep after many of these incidents occur, and our activism has to be sustained across the board. But again, I think a critical piece to the healing and the work at the Black Mental Health Alliance that Richard and Andrea and folks are doing in Baltimore and other groups across the country, we need sustained efforts that are really looking at healing in our community. Because particularly when we, Farajii and Richard and Dr. Nichols, when we look at historical trauma and what we experienced during the period of enslavement to where we are in present society, the trauma that we have experienced is generational. It's historic. And so in order to address historical trauma, once again, we need tried and true, unbossed, unbought Black institutions in our communities, whether they're churches, mosques, nonprofits, mom and pop shops that are focused on healing, that are focused on community development, that are also focused on, and I'm gonna say this because this thing with elected officials is so critically important. Are we recruiting and are we training elected officials to serve as mayors, as city councilmen, as aldermen? Are we grooming Black leadership? Are we grooming Black leadership to be responsible community agents from a political standpoint, or are we more concerned with popularity contests? What college you went to, what sorority or fraternity you belong to, how well known you are in the community versus the deeds and the work ethic and the sweat equity. So this whole thing around politics is also so important. And again, I don't think that we are grooming the kind of leadership that we need to sustain the efforts.
That's and you're talking about a multifaceted approach, Brother David, in bringing institutions as well as organizations as well as the community. And I think that is part of the challenge that's facing us right now, Brother Michael, is that if we're trying, like, I think the big challenge is the culture challenge, like making sure that our people see this as a call to action rather than just another moment. We'd be like, damn, that's messed up what happened to that man. Like getting out of that level of sentiment, moving into a space where we're saying, you know what? Tyre Nichols is going to be the last Black man killed by police. That's a whole different energy, Brother Michael. Talk to me.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Farajii, and Hotep to everybody. So as I've said many times before, and as the panel has echoed here, we're dealing with politics, okay? And we have to understand that politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. So our understanding of politics is directly related to our understanding of history. Unfortunately, one, Americans are very ignorant of history. One, two, African Americans are even more ignorant of history than the average American. So this is why we have to understand. I'm speaking generally speaking now. There are exceptions to the rule. So this is why we have to understand that this has to be more than a moment. It has to be a sustained movement, but it has to be a movement that understands history, law, politics, and economics, because what we saw after George Floyd, and also after there was a settlement for the George Floyd family, rightfully so, rightfully deserved, and then there was conviction of Derek Chauvin and then other officers involved. Then we saw things die down. Now, I'm not saying people who were at the forefront or people who were out protesting through the summer, I'm not saying they weren't committed, but the sustained fight, the sustained movement to understand what are the next steps. Okay, this is something that was lacking. And then the other thing was there was a lack of commitment from when the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act passed the House of Representatives, all the Republicans voted against the bill. 212 Republicans voted against the bill after they talked about how horrible it was what happened with George Floyd. Now those same Republicans have taken control of the House of Representatives. So it's going to be even harder to get something passed. I think.
But do you think that will change though? I mean, isn't this this is sort of like the tipping point to get the movement together. And I've seen so many of my online culture crew, Brother Michaels, that have saying this, Corinna and others who are saying, look, this was the moment that we needed, because now it can give us the momentum that we needed. Do you think that can happen at this point?
It can give us the momentum that we needed, but if you make this a Black issue, you're going to lose again. Because what's missing, the missing element from this And if you watch Representative Jim Jordan, who chairs the Judiciary Committee in the House of Representatives, he's out of Ohio. He was on Meet the Press with this past Saturday on NBC, and he said he doesn't think any laws could be passed that would have stopped what happened to Tyre Nichols from happening. And he voted against the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. What's missing is that each year there are more white people. Each year there are more white people killed by police in America than African Americans. Are we disproportionately killed by police? Yes, but if you make this just a black issue, you're going to lose, especially when you go to the Senate. The Senate is 95% white. There's only 2.5 black people in the entire U.S. Senate, and I say half because Senator Tim Scott, Black Tea Party Republican for South Carolina, half the time he doesn't act like he's black, and he's the one who blocked the George Floyd Justice Policing Act in the Senate.
Hey, Brother Michael, but here's the only pushback that I would have to that, and I know we got a moment before we take another pause, but I want to throw this out there. You made this point. You're saying that actually white people are brutalized more than
no. Listen to what I'm saying. That if you go to Fatal Force is the most comprehensive database of police killings in the country. It's from the Washington Post. I look at it every year. Not only does it detail what happened, it also details whether there was body cam footage, cell phone footage.
Right.
Where is the body cam footage and cell phone footage of white people who are shot and killed by police, especially unjustly, because they have the video.
That's the point I was making, big brother. That's exactly the direction I was going to go. That we don't see this level of brutality splashed on websites for white victims.
And this is why. Read the article, one of my favorite articles that I use in my lectures, thinkprogress.org, March 2015, how news outlets convince you that most criminals are black. And what they do, and I'll post the link here, you can bring it up. What it does, it was a nationwide study of local news outlets, NBC, ABC, CBS, and Fox local news affiliates. And it documented how they disproportionately covered stories that had African Americans as the perpetrators as the perpetrators of crimes in the story, but it was disproportionate to our arrest rate. So we may have been arrested, made up 51% of arrests, but we made up 75% or 70% of the stories dealing with crimes. So what it does is it creates this false narrative. And you have a lot of white people in this country, many of them voted to put Republicans in control of the House, who don't have a problem with over-policing of African Americans. But when you bring white mothers in, talk about how their baby was unjustly killed by police and have them in the Senate. When you bring the Fraternal Order Police in and the International Association of Police Chiefs, because they actually supported the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, bring them in the hearings in the Senate. Bring them in the hearings in the House of Representatives, because they talked about how the bill did not defund the police. They talked about how it actually funded the police and how it was actually good for citizens as well as for police officers. They supported the bill.
I got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, I want to hear from Brother Richard. I want to hear from Brother David. I'm going to share some comments from our online culture crew, because we got to have this conversation as we're talking about healing, moving forward. How do we make sure that Tyre Nichols' death is not one in vain? We'll continue to have the conversation right here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all. All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Pull up a chair. Take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Farajii Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Folks, welcome back to the show. We've been talking about the case of Tyre Nichols and the aftermath of the release of the video of the 5 police officers that were seen, or 6 police officers, that were seen on video brutalizing our brother, and just having a very vibrant conversation with 3 brothers, dynamic brothers. We are joined by Brother Richard Rowe, who is a race scholar. He's an advocate for Black Mental Health Alliance. We're also joined by David Miller, who is an author, and he is the founder and creator of the Dare to Be King curriculum. And we also have our brother Michael Imhotep, who is host of the African History Network podcast show. Folks, we're going to get to your call, get to as many, try to get to some comments. But Brother Richard, going back to what Brother Michael had said about this level of political engagement, right? This George Floyd Justice for Policing Act, this has been certainly something that came out after George Floyd was murdered. But I still feel like, Brother Richard and Brother David, I want to get your take on this as well. I still feel like we're not seeing the level of push around this bill, which is actually a good start. But this culturally, Black folks, we're still kind of like a couple of steps behind when it comes to, trying to politicize a situation like this. You know what I mean? Culturally.
Mm-hmm.
Culturally. Like, we can't get past, like, and this is my concern, for example, Brother Richard, that we see this situation right now, everybody kind of like upset, everybody is hurt. But then this is going to end up being in somebody's joke in a couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to end up being in somebody's song. You know what I'm saying? And I'm saying that that's the space that I'm thinking about. Like, culturally, are we even prepared to really deal with this fight of trying to stop this level of systemic racism, even if it comes from Black hands and Black bodies on
Right.
other Black hands and other Black bodies? Are we really mentally prepared and ready for this? Because I just don't feel like we have undergone so much stress as a people in this country, especially over the past 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
that I don't know if we actually have if we are mentally and emotionally prepared to take on this fight. Am I wrong in thinking that?
I don't think so. I'll let my esteemed brother David Miller and Michael respond to that as well. But I don't think we have the psychological fortitude to really take on too much more, because we haven't healed. And we don't want to really talk a lot about healing, because, again, it seems to be, tangential, or tends not to be as critical, and gets the kind of optics, that, in the street protests and all of those things, albeit important. And what Brother Mike was talking about, critical, because if we're not hitting this with a 4-pronged attack on systems, budgets, policies, and practices, it's not going to really change or move the needle on what we're seeing in the streets and what's happening to young Black men. If we're not attacking systems, policies, budgets, and practices in a real, sustained way, then it's going to be very, very difficult to move the needle. And so while we are trying to get all of that together, my hope and what's happening on my end at the Black Mental Health Alliance and my work with David and others is how do we really, expand and increase, our efforts around healing. And healing has to start with self, but it also has to start in your home. What should most of us be doing right now? In fact, there should be a place where we can go and get real quiet, calm ourselves down, because otherwise, this is going to increase, our anger, our anxiety, our stress, lead to depression, leads to suicide ideation, suicide completion. All those things are going to occur if we keep going down this path of avoiding something that's so important as healing. And healing you have to have a regimen, a daily regimen, a weekly regimen, a monthly regimen around healing. You have to have healing circles. David and I have been involved with healing circles for men. There's got to be more of those circles for men to come in a safe place and to share their feelings and their thoughts around what they see, what they feel, and what the response should be. So for me, while all the conversation around the George Floyd Act and all these other kinds of policies that we've seen cropping up in states across the country, I think that has to go on, but there has to be as much energy and time focus on our healing than there is on the other things that basically occur outside of the healing process.
Brother David, what's your take on that? Brother Richard says psychological fortitude. That sticks out in my mind, and I'm in full agreement. I feel like we assume that everybody is fully healed and ready to go to work to push political agendas, to push economic agendas. And I always ask people, wait a minute, did anybody ask us, are we okay? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like we can't just go through no moment like this and then act like, hey, man, I mean, I know we want to call to action, but we haven't grieved like fully yet.
And so we're not okay, Farajii. And I think it's okay to admit, as a father of three, I'm not okay. So I think that's critically important that we acknowledge. But then I go back to, we got to identify those tried and tested and true organizations that are providing a framework for healing. If you go to church and they haven't been talking about this issue, then you need to figure out another church. If they're not talking about it and figuring out ways to support the larger community, then you're in the wrong church, mosque, or synagogue. But one of the things that I want to uplift, and Richard mentioned it briefly, is the parents. I mean, I think that's also a missing component to all of these discussions. What do you say to your children when they jump on their phones? Because we are urging people not to watch the video, but in this 24-hour news cycle, laced with all of these different social media platforms. And when I was growing up, Richard, you only maybe had 3 channels on TV. Right. Now you got 600 channels. That the children are going to see this. The children saw white boy with his knee on George Floyd's neck. So part of the work that we're doing is around creating talking points and opportunities for families to begin to have these conversations. Because your children are in the car and you drive by a police officer and they are afraid. And so that's another institution. When we talk about the Black family, what are we doing with the Black family? What are we doing with parents to help them have these conversations with their children? And Farajii, that might even be another show.
No, and I'm so happy that you brought that up, because that's exactly, I think, where we need to have the conversation. I mean, we as adults, as adult Black men, we've taken a lot of hits, but now I'm concerned about what is the conversation supposed to look like. And I know you've done this, Brother Rich has done this. I'm sure, Brother Michael, you've been a part of these conversations of having, quote unquote, the talk with young Black males. At this point, Brother David, what should the talk be? How should we have it? When should we have it?
You know, so and again, Farajii, that's a lightning rod for controversy in terms of when should we have this talk and what should be the substance or the content related to the talk. I mean, I created this thing called the 10 Rules of Survival. It stopped by the police, then went viral a couple of years ago, not as the definitive solution, but at least providing parents and folks in schools and in other people who do youth work with some talking points to at least begin to have this conversation. And so I see that I know you got to come up on a break really quickly, right. But there are some things that there are some talking points that are critically important for parents. And if we have time after the break, I can mention some.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We're going to give you the time that you need because this is the information that is key to our survival. Folks, we want to continue the conversation. I got a dope panel with me of Black men who know what they're dealing with, who understands the issues, and most importantly, are going to do their part to save lives. Stay with me, folks. The conversation continues right here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. We want to jump right back into our conversation as we're talking about healing from the Tyre Nichols tragedy. How do we move forward? How do we make sure that we come out of this tragedy with great substance and, more importantly, to come out healed and a little bit better than when we got into this space? Brother David, I want to give you a chance to talk to us about this idea of the talk, because that has come up in the conversation for my online culture crew that are saying that, you know, a lot of people, of course, we got sons, we got daughters, we got nieces and nephews, and this situation has heightened that conversation. So yeah. How do we have the talk where you're talking to Black men and Black women about young Black men and young Black women about their interactions with the police?
And so this is, and Richard and I have had this conversation both as fathers and men in the community. This is a deeply frustrating conversation that we got to have. We've had a Black president, a Black attorney general, a Black vice president, more Black, millionaires, not sports figures, but more Black millionaires involved in business and commerce, more Black elected officials than we've ever had. But we still got to have this conversation. So I created what's called the 10 Rules of Survival if stopped by the police. I'll try to drop the video in the chat. If you go to Google and type in "get home safely," you'll see the video. I created this for parents to be able to have this conversation with our sons and daughters. And again, in these 10 rules of survival that we advocate, you talk to your children about, we're not saying that if you execute these 10 rules that there's no way that you're going to be killed or beaten by the police. But at least it's a way to begin to have the discussion. So many parents reach out to me and say they just don't know where to begin. So we've created a template, if you will, and have an entire curriculum. So I'm only going to just read a few of them. One, it's always important to just even before you start the conversation in terms of getting into some until you drill down on these 10 points, ask your children what they know about the police or what they think about the police. Allow them in their own words or their own language to share with you what they think about the police. Ask them what they have seen on video, on television, or social media about the police, because then you begin to gain a perspective of what your 8-year-old or your 9-year-old or your 11-year-old or your 17-year-old has ingested as it relates to, mass media and social media. So that's always a good way to have a conversation. Have a conversation over a meal. Children like to eat. Make it kind of non-threatening, right? Start the conversation in a way, and I see you got the video up. Start the conversation in a way that it's more exploratory, that you don't want to frighten your children, right? But some of the 10 points, and I don't know if you can play this. I can't hear the sound, but after I'm finished, maybe they can play it again. The first thing is helping your son or daughter understand that if they are involved in a situation where they are encountered by the police, the number one thing to do is be polite and respectful, regardless of what's going on. If the police officer is cursing you out, yelling and screaming, the best case scenario is you want to get home safely. I don't care how many episodes of Law and Order you watched, and you might be versed in constitutional law at 12 or 17 or 35. Your number one goal is to get home safely. And that's why that's why the video is titled Get Home Safely, 10 Rules of Survival Stopped by the Police. First and foremost, be polite, be respectful. Don't get into an argument. I don't care if the officer says you fit the description of somebody who stole a car, because one of the things that officers are trained to do is to push your button. They're trained to push your button. And so be polite, be respectful. All right. Remember, so the first rule is be polite, be respectful. The second rule is your number one goal is to get home safely. At the end of the day, I have 3 children. I have a son who is in a stand your ground state. He's in Tallahassee at Florida A&M University. When he said he wanted to go to Florida, I was terrified, but he left having downloadable information. Not if he gets stopped, when he gets stopped, he already had downloaded information around what to do with the police. I'm gonna just read a couple more. 3, don't ever argue with the police. They want you to argue with them, particularly if they think you are an assailant or have been involved in a crime. They want to move you off your square. They want you to get mad. They want to call your names and say you the MF that broke in the store, or you the MF that stole the purse. They want you to get mad, right? So be polite, be respectful. Remember, you want to get home safely. Don't get into any kind of argument, and no matter what happens, never admit to anything. Even if you're 16, dad and mom gave you the car, you out driving, and you were speeding, and they come up to you and say, we know you were speeding. Don't admit anything, because that can be used in court. So we've created these 10 rules to at least begin the conversation, because the sad reality is Farajii, we're not preparing our children for a world that hates them.
All right, let me ask you a couple of questions around this very quickly, Brother David, because folks are listening and bringing it up. Pauline Hurt said Tyre was respectful, and you see what happened to him. We've seen in other cases where Black men have obeyed the commands, and then the officers still find a reason.
No, there are no guarantees. I always tell people there are no guarantees, but we at least have to have the conversation. Because as Richard said, and Brother Imhotep said, this thing is multi-pronged. There isn't one solution, but one of my main concerns is that we got to talk to the babies, because they're going to, at some point in their lives, they're going to encounter police contact. And again, we're not saying that these 10 rules are guaranteed. I can only speak for myself. In the vast majority of incidents that I've been involved with in the police, I've lived through the stop and nothing has happened to me because I was polite. Now, we do know that in the Nichols case and in other cases, you can be polite, you can be respectful, and you can still lose their life. But at the same time, we created these 10 rules, Richard and others, and Hotep and Farajii, we gotta have this conversation with our children because they're already watching the videos. They've seen all of these videos.
Conscious thought, you bring in, you said something. You said the fact that we have to have the talk is trauma in and of itself. That's a clear indication that there are laws, rules, regulations, and ordinances that are separate from them and just for us.
100% agree. We live in a society that every single day shows its hate and contempt for us. But a people that are critically conscious and smart realize in order for us to move toward, healing, as Richard talked about, in order for us to move toward some of the work that Brother Imhotep is talking about in terms of from a legislative or policy standpoint, that we're not playing chess, we playing checkers, and some of it is strategy. But I want you guys to hear me. Our children are afraid, and we're not talking to them.
Let me ask you this question, Brother Richard, then Brother Michael. Brother Richard, with the fact that these were 5 black male police officers, how do we reconcile? How do we just process that? Because we already kind of expected some things from a white officer, but the fact that these were 5 black police officers, now we have to be even more on guard. So how do we process that to when we have these conversations with their children? And let me just throw this out there. One of the things I did, Brother David, and Brother Richard, and Brother Michael, is that when I moved into when we moved to an area in Baltimore, the first thing that I did with my 9-year-old son was to introduce him to the police in the neighborhood, so they can see his face. They know who his father is, and there's a relationship. Now, these were beautiful officers. These were black officers. You can tell they were community oriented. They had a conscience and all of those things. But my son has a positive impression of the officers because of that experience, where he got so close to the officers. Like when he would go out to play, he would go out and play with his friends next to the officers. They would bring the officer, hey, can we go out with officer so-and-so? They outside. Sure. But It was just like that little thing of just introducing your children to the officers that you see walking the beat in your neighborhood, or that you see in your neighborhood. And I'm talking about even white ones, so that they understand. Because I always teach my son, it's like you got to have a respect for authority. If you want to be a black man that's going to live a long time in this country, you better have some damn respect for authority, right? And not to being afraid, but just be mindful, because police do have the license to take your life and to walk and to go home at night under the guise of justifiable homicide. So very quickly, Brother Richard, when we look at this fact that this was 5 black police officers, what do we do with that? How do you process that to your children, to your daughter, your son, your niece, your nephew? Now they got to feel a certain way when the black officer. Before we kind of felt like, oh, okay, we know there's some black officers out there that were crazy. Yes.
Right.
Blow that out the water.
Right, and it's sad to have to really explain that to our children, to process why black folk are killing and hurting other black folks, given our history, because that should be off the table. We should not be having that conversation about why we are hurting. But in the movie, and David knows I always recommend this movie for us to watch. The movies that starred Denzel Washington, played as a psychiatrist, and Antoine Fisher. He gave Antoine Fisher 2 books in that movie. One was The Slave Community. So we got to talk to our children. What is the effects of slavery on our psychology? It is possible within that system, a dehumanizing system for the victims and for the oppressed to assume and to take on the role, to take on the same kind of characteristics as the oppressor. So we've got to have that conversation, got to break it down, but simply say that in this society, in a society that was built on white supremacy and inferiorization and superiorization, that it's possible for even those that are oppressed can become just as brutal against their own as those who are the oppressor. That's going to take some talking, some conversation. It's going to take some critical analysis in terms of why this occurs. But he gave him 2 books. He gave him that book, The Slave Community by James Blasingame. And he also gave him the book, The Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey. So he was trying to explain the phenomenon of a policeman or others oppressed people, oppressors doing harm to oppressed people. And he also gave him a book that basically spoke to the aspirations of the people, in terms of really trying, and it was more a healing document than anything else. What I'm trying to say, brother, is that we've got to explain to our children and to our people that what we are witnessing, a lot of this is the effects of this intergenerational, transgenerational impact of slavery and white supremacy on our psychology, on our emotional health, and all of that. And all that's occurring, and we're not explaining and not talking to our people about these things. And so we just think that this is stuff that's coming from nowhere. It's coming from a place that basically has been programmed and has been institutionalized. This system, we say the police department, the policemen may be Black, but they have adopted what? A culture of blue. It's a blue culture. They believe that they're part of the blue codes. Don't snitch on each other. Don't tell on each other. Don't basically intervene when you see this brutality, this brutality and attack on other people, Black folks in particular. They basically stood by or participated in that. That's a phenomenon, or that's a situation that you've got to explain to your children so they understand what's really going on here. So in that brief kind of summation of the slave community and the other things that I mentioned, that too could be another entire show, but that I'll leave it there.
Brother Richard, I truly appreciate you and the great work that you're doing. The Black Mental Health Alliance, folks, make sure y'all go to the website, blackmentalhealth.com, blackmentalhealth.com. This is where you can find work about the Black Mental Health Alliance, the great work that Brother Richard and many other Black men and women are doing. Brother Richard, thank you so much. Brother David, how can folks find the information about their interactions with police?
You can go to our website, daretobeking.net, and it's spelled out exactly as it sounds, daretobeking.net. There it is.
Brother David Miller, author, father, just all around good brother, but he is an advocate and has started a number of works relating to Black male survival, teaching children about literacy and a whole lot of things. Make sure y'all check him out at daretobeking.net. Thank you, Brother David. Brother Richard, we truly appreciate you.
Appreciate you, Farajii. Thank you, brother.
Absolutely.
Keep up the great work, Brother Imhotep.
Oh, thanks. Thanks,
yes,
brother.
Sir. Yes, sir.
You
Absolutely.
too. Keep up the great work as well.
Absolutely. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick pause. When we come forward, we're going to continue our conversation with Brother Michael Imhotep, and you stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture. Want to have our, we're going to certainly keep our eyes on the situation with Tyre Nichols and of course, the trial of these 5 former Memphis, Tennessee police officers. 6 now, maybe the 6th. And I'm going to bring Brother Michael back into the frame here because Brother Michael, I think a lot of people are going to keep their eyes open on what happens next with the trial. What's going to happen with this sixth officer, this white officer that was involved in this case?
Right.
You know,
Preston Hempfield.
Yes, Preston Hempfield, and you know, again, my hope is that this doesn't get kind of swept under the rug. Like this becomes a big moment right now, and then 1 week later we're kind of on to something else. But you know, we're seeing something, and I wanted to get your take on what's happening in Florida with Attorney Ben Crump, because even though they're not the same, they are the same because there's an all-out attack on blackness in this country that we all should understand. Talk to us about what you're seeing, Brother Michael, as it relates to Ben Crump's situation, his latest lawsuit against the governor of Florida, the state of Florida, as it relates to these AP African American courses. What do you foresee coming out of that, and how do you think that is going to impact the fight on the police brutality side?
Well, what we see here is we see youth engaged, because you have three African American plaintiffs. They are three high school students in Florida, and you have Attorney Benjamin Crump. Now, there's an article from NBC News, and I talked about this briefly on the African History Network show last night, and I just posted the link here in the chat, so if your control room can bring it up, that'd be good. Famed civil rights lawyer Benjamin Crump warns DeSantis he might sue over Florida's rejection of AP African American Studies course. So we have to understand the law to understand how to use the law to our advantage. And if we say that white people or the system, if they use the law to trap us, then we need to understand the law better than they understand the law, so we know where all the booby traps are or the pitfalls are, and we don't fall into those traps, and we understand how to disarm them of that weapon and use it against them. So Benjamin Crump was joined by three AP Honors high school students at an announcement in Tallahassee, Florida. This was on January 25th. That was Wednesday, January 25th. Benjamin Crump said, "We're here to give notice to Governor DeSantis that he does not negotiate with the College Board to allow AP African American Studies to be taught in the classroom across the state of Florida, that these three young people will be the lead plaintiffs in a historic lawsuit." Now, one of those plaintiffs is African-American high school student, African-American male high school student, brilliant brother. He was interviewed by Joanne Reed on the Readout last week. People need to check that out. Go to msnbc.com and check out that interview. Now, Benjamin Crump was joined by several Florida state legislators, and the Florida education officials did not specify exactly what the content. Well, no, we talked about this last week, Farajii. They expressed 6 areas of concern. Okay, yeah. 6 areas of concern out of 100. Out of 100 topics, they came up with 6 areas of concern. Now, I think they may have some success with this lawsuit, and we have to realize that we have to fight back. We can't just lay down and complain. We have to fight back, because now the other thing is that the College Board has already said that this is the pilot framework for the course, and they tweak the course, based upon feedback. They tweaked the course. Now, the final framework is coming out first week in February. It should be February 1st. The final framework is coming out. So we'll see what it looks like. But we have to understand, we have to have these legal champions who will take up the cause and fight when you have bullies like Governor Ron DeSantis, but also the Florida Department of Education. So, right. Hopefully they're successful in this legal fight. And the other thing is that there should be a huge galvanizing of support in the community, but also with corporate America, corporations who have relationships with the Florida Department of Education as well. Where are they in these issues? Because African Americans spend dollars with these corporations. They make billions of dollars off of us each year. So where are they when it comes to this? This is the same issue with the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. There was around June 2021, I think it was. I could pull up the article. There were 150 corporations, Pepsi, other corporations, who signed on to a letter supporting the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. But then all of a sudden they got amnesia and laryngitis. Because the bill passed the House of Representatives in August 2021 by a vote of 219 to 211, and all the Republicans voted against the bill. And then the bill died in the Senate. All the Republicans in the Senate, all 50 of them in the Senate at the time, voted against the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Okay, Manchin and Sinema voted for the bill. They just didn't vote to change the filibuster. But all 50 Republicans voted against changing the filibuster as well. So we have to understand how to leverage the power and tools that we have. What's missing from the whole conversation are targeted, sustained economic withdrawal strategies, which is what Dr. King was talking about April 3rd, 1968, the day before he was assassinated. When he told African Americans in Memphis, Tennessee, boycott Wonder Bread, Hart's Bread, Coca-Cola, and Seal Test Milk because of their discriminatory hiring practices. He talked about supporting African-American owned insurance companies, African-American owned banks, supporting our own businesses as well. And he talked about redistributing the pain through targeted, sustained economic withdrawal strategies. A lot of this conversation dealing with voting rights and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act is also connected to the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. And in both of those, largely, especially from your major civil rights organizations, what was missing was dealing with sustained economic withdrawal strategies, targeting 3 or 4 or 5 top corporations and having nationwide economic boycotts against them, like Jesse Jackson did against Coca-Cola. I think it was 1981. He had a successful national economic boycott against Coca-Cola. The way he did Rainbow Push should be like a blueprint for understanding how to engage with corporations.
And you know what, Brother Michael, we got a couple of moments left, but I think what you're saying is absolutely necessary, and it helps us to give the strategy. And that's why I said, even though these are two separate issues of police brutality and what we're seeing with these AP courses, Ben Crump is the family's attorney for Tyre Nichols' family.
Right. Yeah, he's one of the family attorneys. Yes.
He's one of the family attorneys. Mm-hmm. And then when you're seeing this type of just this effort to keep Black folks under control.
Right.
To not, I mean, and I'm still kind of connecting the dots, Brother Michael, but I'm seeing it it all adds to creating a culture in this country where we once again are saying it now. It's not behind closed doors. It's very open and obvious.
Right.
Your Blackness is a punishment.
Right. Well,
Blackness is a stain.
It maintains a system of white supremacy and racism. And as you have a declining white population percentage-wise, there's greater fear that they're going to become a racial minority in this country. It's predicted by the year 2043 that white people will no longer be the majority of the population in this country. The 2020 census showed that white people dropped below 60% of the population for the first time since 1790, when the first census was taken at 57% of the population. So as you have this taking place, as you have the browning of America, you have more people who are fearing that, and they're fighting back. We need to understand law, policies, economics, history to be able to fight back as well.
Absolutely. We're going to have to end this conversation. But Brother Michael, I know you always advise people to go to your website, the African History Network, and you got 30 seconds, big brother. Talk to us.
Okay, so African American History Month starts February, and if you scroll up, because on Saturday, February 4th, 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we're doing I'm doing a free lecture that deals with the history of African American history, history of Black History Month. It deals with this year's theme, which is Black resistance. Okay, this year's theme, which is Black resistance. So go to our website. We had a free class session there, and then also we have a new online course starting up. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, 12-week online class. We have class number 1 coming up very soon. You can register for that as well. TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com, TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com. And this year's theme is Black resistance. Black resistance. That's the annual theme for Black History Month. I'll be doing a presentation dealing with Black resistant movements and the history of Black History Month as well, and Dr. Carter G. Woodson. Absolutely. TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com.
Folks, you can check out Brother Michael and Hotep here on Mondays here on The Culture, and of course on Roland Martin Unfiltered. And we always are happy to have our brother on, and definitely check out his website, TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Brother Michael, thank you for joining us today, brother.
Hey, thanks for having me, Farajii.
Absolutely. All right, folks, that's going to do it for me. I thank each and every one of you. I want to thank my very fantastic guests. I want to thank Brother Richard Rowe from the Black Mental Health Alliance, Brother David Miller for the Dare to Be King curriculum, and my other brother, Dr. Jason Nichols. Folks, if you want to continue this conversation, make sure you go to our website at blackstarnetwork.com. Make sure you download the app on all of your devices. And most importantly, continue to support us as we are having these conversations during these moments, during this time in our country. This is the time for you to tune into Black media. This is why Black media is so important. So go to blackstarnetwork.com and support us there. Also follow us on social media at Black Star Network on Instagram and on Twitter. And you can also follow me, yours truly, Farajii Muhammad. You can follow me at The Real Farajii on Instagram and Farajii on Twitter, and I love to engage with you. That's going to do it for me. As always, stay tuned for RMU up next, but don't forget, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong, stand for what's right, while being yourself in the process. God willing, we'll talk tomorrow for another exciting and informative set of conversations right here on The Culture, only on the Black Star Network. Peace.